Yeah, and I'll be your host for the session. So, over the past decade, India's mobility landscape has been undergoing a remarkable shift. The streets we move through every day are no longer seen as mere conduits for vehicles, but a vibrant public space, and that needs to be safe, inclusive, and resilient for all. This conversation is particularly timely for India today, at a moment when cities are making unprecedented investments in transport infrastructure, such as metro, flyovers, bus systems, and many others. Embedding road safety, accessibility, and climate resilience into these core projects is critical if we are to ensure that our urban future is truly people first. So, to begin our session, I would like to invite Mr. Dhaval Asher, Associate Director, Sustainable Transport and Cities, WRI India, for a welcome address. Hi, Dhaval.
Um, no, thanks, Chetan, and a very warm welcome to all of you here. Thank you for coming here, and thank you to the panelists, for accepting to be on the panel. I will not take much time, 60 seconds or a little more. So the reason we are calling this Safer Streets for Tomorrow, a decade of this decade of action, learning from a decade of practice is as follows. I mean, in 2015, under the Bloomberg Philanthropies Initiative for Global Road Safety, us and a bunch of other kind of organizations got to work in Mumbai with the corporation and any other stakeholder if needed, to just improve road safety. Our role as WRI in that partnership was essentially to work on safer by design, with the basic premise being that in Mumbai, as is the case in many other cities, more than 50% of people, those are dying in road crashes, are pedestrians. So you can't, put a helmet or a seat belt on a pedestrian, right? So just from there. Fortunately, for for us, it was a good sort of long-term support for us to embed ourselves in the corporations, really understand sort of the entire practice from within the government and outside, and try to affect as much change as was possible. I've also been fortunate to actually be a part of the 10 years of sort of this work, right? So to that end, one, we've managed to kind of document this in a report, which we'd like our esteemed guests to unveil today. And I think one conversation that I'm really looking forward for us to have, and we have a really nice senior esteemed panel, is to examine the current apparatus of managing streets or transport in our cities right now. There can be an urban planning informs street design or transport informs. It's all connected, right? Where we examine the current apparatus to see if the current apparatus is going to accelerate the existing trends, whatever they may be, right? Such that is the desired outcome higher, or are the unintended consequences higher? And then to sort of think about what is the sort of process or the apparatus of the future of our mobility. Really looking forward to this conversation. I'll stop here, and I think, Chetan, we can get started.
So, thank you, Dhaval. To set the stage, we'll now have a presentation on lessons from Mumbai's Safer Streets journey, based on our decade-long collaboration between the BMC, several partners, and WRI India. The presentation will highlight what it takes or really takes to scale pedestrian safety from pilots to policies, from projects to systemic changes. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Akanksha Agarwal, Program Manager, System Cities and Transport, WRI India. Hi, Akanksha.
Thank you, Chetan. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll be presenting a quick snapshot of the lessons learned from Mumbai's journey in safer streets. Now, this report is a formative evaluation of the decade long efforts to improve road safety in Mumbai. The different approaches deployed by WRI India, they were evaluated using the framework from Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Now, this framework helped us unpack four key questions. Are the approaches doing the right thing? How well do these approaches fit? Are the approaches achieving their intended objectives? And will the benefits from these really last? Now, the three approaches that we evaluated involved one, design interventions for street improvement. This included design for almost 82 intersections and 38 kilometers of corridors. Secondly, programs to scale up this kind of work beyond isolated projects. And lastly, systemic engagements, which could really trigger a potential to have a transformational change in the city. Now, some key findings emerged from this evaluation. Firstly, priorities of the city shape what projects get funded in our society, right? So, in case of Mumbai, over the past 20 years, almost 370 billion has been spent on large infrastructure projects. Now, these projects were intended to either decongest the city or improve the connectivity to and within the suburbs, reduce travel times, but all of this primarily focused around the vehicular movement. A closer look at the BMC budget, however, will tell us that between 2010 and 2024, only 2.3% of the BMC's budget was dedicated to pedestrian infrastructure. It was not that they had not invested anywhere, but this was the specific allocation which was made. Whereas pedestrians, they continue to account for 47% of the road traffic fatalities in Mumbai. On a more positive note, we also evaluated some of the interventions that we were able to implement in the city, and the evaluation of the crash data which was available to us showed that pedestrian involvement in the crashes at these specific locations, which is 6 intersections and 3 street corridors, it had really come down. Secondly, 75% of the people that we surveyed said that these intersections now felt extremely safe to safe. And same goes for the corridors also. So roughly a large portion of people felt the safety at these locations had improved. Another thing was that we designed 82 intersections and 38 kilometers, but not all of it was implemented. So across the 21 intersections that got implemented and 20 kilometers of corridors which also got done, a total of roughly 90,000 square meter of public area was reclaimed. So imagine if all of what was designed was implemented, the potential to reclaim large amount of public space in the city was really possible. And also, maybe citywide action has come a long way, from NUTP when it was first envisioned and when these pedestrian priorities really came in the city. But it took really 5 to 6 years of sustained engagement in the city to see any kind of visible results, right? And these were largely interventions on the ground funded by municipal budgets. While WRI India did deploy an integrated approach where we looked at also integrating the urban design into the traditional civil engineering-led approach, some key questions really remain, and these are around the sustainability of these interventions. So really looking forward, the question is how can we ensure sustainability of these interventions? Many of the projects that we had implemented, a lot more got redeveloped and some structures got built into them, right? Because of how the transport infra in the city was evolving. So the question really is then how can we ensure that the idea sustains, right? That safe streets, safe life. How do we ensure that the idea goes on? And also sustainability of the project. So whatever we've done, it still continues to function and provide for the safety and accessibility without really compromising and accommodating the evolving transport infra also. Lastly, from this evaluation which we had done, some key recommendations stemmed up, and this report also provides some key recommendations focusing on 2 major things. One, how do we create enabling conditions for this kind of safer streets work to really mainstream. So really building capacity of the government that we're working with, improving feedback loops in the system. And secondly, around improving the processes, right, for really planning, designing, implementing these safe streets. So working on adopting an integrated approach whenever some new infra is coming up, or improving the data collection processes in the city. And lastly, this report also highlights the opportunity to leverage really some new entry points for the safer streets work, like climate action, metro expansion, and clean transport. And how can these be really seized now to advance the agenda on the safer streets? These can really be powerful pathways and push the vision for safer streets for all. So this was a brief presentation. With that, we now move to the panel discussion. I would now like to introduce the speakers for the session. Devolina Kundu, Director, NIUA. I'd request all the panelists if you could take the stage now. Manjunath Shekhar, Director, Sustainable Urban Mobility, GIZ. Gerald Oliver, Lead Transport Specialist at the World Bank. Felipe A. Ramirez, Director, Urban Mobility, WRI Ross Center for Sustainable Cities. And Priyanka Sulklan, Co-founder and Principal, Urban Design and Mobility, Root Bridge Collab. I'd also like to invite Sudeshna Chatterjee from WRI India, who is the Director for Research at Sustainable Cities and Transport Program, who is also the lead author on the report, to come over and moderate the session. And also Dhaval Ashar, who heads the road safety work at WRI India, to moderate the session. Over to you.
Thanks a lot, Akanksha. This is working. Hello. Okay, thank you. A warm welcome to all the panelists. We are really excited to be able to launch this report today. It was, a lot of work over 15 years, and a lot of work evaluating and putting this together also over the last 2 years. I would like to maybe start with Dr. Kundu. We talk about one of the main ideas behind this work is to make cities more walkable. And we know in the case of Indian cities, walkability is really an equity issue because it's the poor who walk more than others. And actually, Indian cities, we don't have as much car ownership as other developed countries. But since you work very closely on urban missions and with the ministry, it's interesting to note how none of the urban missions till date, they talk about transforming cities, they talk about sustainable cities, but they don't really talk about mainstreaming walkability as a key element of these missions. So what do you think it will take to move the needle on that kind of thinking within urban missions?
Thank you, Sudeshna, for this question. I think the light is on. Am I audible? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the question. I think it's a striking paradox when we are aware that in our cities 30 to 60% of the trips are by walk, and as you mentioned, I think it is by default that the poor walk the maximum, and somewhere, somehow, it has fallen through the policy corridors. Like until now, I think it's only the Smart Cities mission which talked about walkability as one of their center pieces while designing the area-based development. I think there were a few competitions, challenges across the 100 cities. But if you look at the macro picture, when we have around more than 10,000 towns and cities, where if you are looking only at 100 cities and trying to bring in some policy interventions. I think that is not all. And even in those 100 cities, I would imagine very few have really gone for pedestrian tracks, right? Even a few, because it was an area-based intervention, 3 to 4% of the entire city area had been retrofitted with the smart cities mission. So I think that is a very minuscule share of intervention. It has to be citywide and for all cities. When we are talking again about the carbon emissions, we are talking about sustainability of cities. So we cannot do that until and unless we really mainstream pedestrianization. So if wherever you walk on the streets, I think even if one wants to walk, one can't. Right. I live in Vasant Kunj and we have a very good biodiversity park around 2.5 kilometers away. And even to reach that biodiversity park, I think it is always better to take your own car and then you start walking from there, because there are so many ups and downs, broken pavements. It becomes very difficult to reach the park safely. And again, so many vehicular, like there are so many junctions where you have to cross the to reach the pedestrian tracks, you have to cross the roads, and there it becomes really difficult seeing the traffic coming from all directions. So I believe it's very important that we really sensitize our policymakers, and at all levels, the center, state, and local. And even within the local level, I think interventions need to happen at the ward or sub-ward level, at the neighborhood level. So the councillors or the RWA members who are working at the local level need to take the first step, and the citizens at large, because when I'm driving a car in India, I would start accelerating when I see a orange color, right? Instead of slowing down. And at red, maybe I speed up more. So that sensitization of the people who drive cars is also very important. Then again, having a dedicated budget at the local level. It's very important for the urban local bodies. They need to have a dedicated budget for these interventions, because as you are aware, I was part of the Delhi Finance Commission, and one interesting revealing results of one of the studies which we conducted was there are 21 agencies who own Delhi's roads, right? So when there are so many agencies, I think they need to also coordinate among themselves and not stop their interventions only to the roads. I think the pavements are equally important, and there should be an easy access to reach the pavement. So for a child or for an elderly or for a person who is of special need, it becomes very difficult to access the pavements. I think that lens should be there for the city planners. Again, we need to take cognizance of the local practices. I think at NIUA we prepared the harmonized guidelines and also a few other city framework documents, which I do not think even most of the cities are aware of. So sensitization of the city makers and the citizens at large is very important to really make our pavements citizen friendly. And again, not only that, I think safety is one of the most important issues there. Until and unless our streets are safe, I don't think we can really use our streets. I was in Singapore a few weeks back, and I took photographs at every maybe 10 or 15 minutes. And my daughter who was with me, she kept asking, Mama, why do you stop and start taking photographs? I was just clicking the photographs just to see that pedestrians first, right? So any vehicle passing through has to stop when there's a pedestrian. And here, the vehicles speed up when it finds pedestrians on the street. So I think we need to go backwards and learn once again that this is the future of citizens and the cities. Just now, we are, I think, going in the reverse direction.
So much, lots of things to mull over, and a lot of very interesting points, from coordination to budget to sensitization. I will actually now go to Gerald, to you. And on the question of budgets, we saw that graph from Mumbai, which is quite stark, right? Because you have about 2 to 3% of the municipal budget that goes for road safety and pedestrian infrastructure creation. When you think of a city like Mumbai, it's not so bad because it has such a large budget. But this kind of analysis is also very rare across cities in India. There's just for a few cities there is some evidence. But the fact that there is so much large infrastructure spends going on in these large cities, what do you think are the possibilities of holding cities accountable for integrating pedestrian safety as part of these big ticket projects? Because they're all happening on roads, whether it's a raised road or a coastal road or access roads to metros. What are your thoughts on that, and what are some of the examples that you can share with us?
Thanks, Sudeshna, and really great to be with all of you today. I would start by challenging the premise you started with, to say that, walkability is an equity issue. I've had the fortune to visit many cities. There's not one single livable city where walkability doesn't feel right for any socio-economic category. And I think, Madam, you were mentioning rightly the case of Singapore. I was with the CM of Andhra Pradesh 2-3 weeks ago in Singapore. We walked through all the streets. It's just seamless, like everything has been designed with the user in mind. And it doesn't matter if you're a chief minister or you are, somebody with low income. So I would challenge that if you think about the Viksit Bharat goal, it's not an optionality to think about, do we want to have quality walking space? I mean, if you don't, you will never get there, right? I mean, that's really quite fundamental. So sorry for challenging that, but I think that's an important message. And I must say, since I've been working now 5 years in India, there are not many cities that would qualify as having a good seamless pathway. Maybe Chandigarh has some examples of that, some other areas, but as the city level, holistically, not quite, right? So the opportunity is huge. The good thing is there are many, many examples by now of cities that have reversed the situation where you are today and then started moving really very fast forward in the other direction. So I had the fortune of working in the city of Tianjin, right? I will just give you a few examples because it's I think, quite relevant. The city had invested $10 billion in metros. The metros was not carrying out enough people. The people were not satisfied. Congestion was growing, etc. And then we worked with them for a full $150 million program, only focused on walking and cycling. Okay, now $150 million may seem like big, but compared to the 10 billion, it's 1.5%, right? So it's not a very big investment relative to the major investment in mass transit and other systems that the city has been investing in. Now, that was in 2013 when the conversation started, and there was a lot of convincing required. Why would the World Bank support this kind of project in a city that is quite advanced? Tianjin is quite advanced. But now the project was completed 2 years ago, and it had a economic rate of return of 55%. It contributed massively in an increase in ridership in the metro and the like. And the quality of the urban environment completely shifted. So back to your question, what can be done? I mean, the first thing to realize is it can be a combination or it can be a separate approach. Combination is whenever you have a mass transit project coming in, you need to really extract from that a 5%, whatever the exact number, but a significant amount of money needs to be put aside upfront, right? That is only going to be, fulfilling the policy of 2017, but actually implementing it so that the money is available associated with that to make sure that the last mile connectivity is proper. The second is, in any large city that has already done a lot of these investment and where the system is underperforming. I think we know of a few metro systems in India where the ridership is not up to the expectation. Why not have a dedicated project that fixes, the walkability at a network level across all of these stations and create, quality urban space? Now, moving one step forward, and that's maybe interesting in the context of the Urban Challenge Fund, is why not use that as part of the transformation of neighborhoods? And because the quality of a neighborhood gets improved, the taxes that comes from it more than pay back for the transformation that has taken place. So, it can be a standalone, very focused program. It can be associated with mass transit. The one thing that doesn't work is trying to do a few kilometers here and there as small pilot. India needs more than that. Cities like Chennai, where I've been working, we have 1,000 people dying every year in road accident, mostly pedestrian and motorcyclists. They cannot wait. I mean, every year you wait, you're losing 1,000 people, right? So it's not a coma or an economic evaluation. It's 1,000 lives that you lose. So what Chennai did was to create a Chennai road safety program based on data-driven solution where they analyze the entire network, where the occurrences were, the causality, etc. And they set up a cell under the Chennai Unified Metropolitan Transport Authority that includes the police to look into what from a design perspective, what from a enforcement perspective needs to be adjusted. And they found that there were issues of behavior, wearing a seatbelt, wearing helmet, speeding, etc. There were elements of design that needed to be fixed. So by systematically looking at all of these dimensions and looking also at reaction time of emergency service if an accident happens, then they are now targeting a reduction of 25% of fatalities by next year and 50% by 2030 with a very systematic program, very much focused on walkability and the like, right? So the vision needs to be captured, needs to be, quantified so that people can go back to the vision and understand what is at stake and how much progress we are making. Because even if you have, next year, 700 people dying is still 700 people too many, right? So, but you need to keep track of the progress so that you have incentive of continuing moving forward. And that then can be tied to the funding associated with the subsector that start showing real progress as you move forward.
Thank you so much. Just to clarify, when I said that it's an equity issue, is because that is the unfortunate truth. Its walkability is for everyone, but for the poor, it means much more because they have no choice. Okay, thank you for that. I'll come to you, Priyanka, and you are a practitioner. You had been, in this space, and we know that we had been operating under the NUTP, which is this whole mantra of, gives this whole NMT infrastructure a viable space, right? So I would like to know from you, what had been some of the challenges that you have encountered when you were trying to implement some of these safe streets designs from the planning to implementation in Indian cities?
Thank you, Rishna, and really answers, and thank you for pointing out the budgets and how we need to initiate these throughout the city. The challenges, I think the biggest challenge the practitioner we are facing is that when we look into the briefs of the projects, they are still lacking a comprehensive approach. So when we reach out to doing projects, it's mostly very limited to putting a footpath. Yes, we are talking about walkability, but walkability is not only laying tiles for footpath. It includes utilities, it includes a lot of microclimate around it, and of course our streets are public spaces, so we need to create interaction spaces around it. So all this comprehensive approach is still missing from the briefs and the projects. So that is one of the biggest challenges when we, as an urban designer, trying to create a street which is very complete. The authorities are lacking that understanding that that the project requires this, and that is the reason it also lack budget to do rest of the things around those footpaths. So that's of course the biggest implementation challenge. And then second is that the capacity within the authority to understand the details of the projects, and then the contractors who are actually executing are not able to achieve the quality with the material, with the workmanship. So all that factors coming together ultimately lands up executing only maybe 20% of the project what is envisioned. So that's the biggest challenge, because it's good to discuss that. Yes, I mean, the good news for us is that in last 1.5 decade we have been able to achieve the awareness, like everybody is aware that how street should look like, but that challenge is still there to translate that on ground. And these are the things which are required at systematic change, where the budgets are there, and the budget has to be bold. It cannot be small budgets to lay some tiles. It has to be bold to look into streets as spaces which are going to provide you climate resilience. They're going to provide you microclimate. Utilities are going through, and biggest thing is that they are the biggest public spaces. So if you really want us to live together, we need to look those streets through that lens. So budgets need to be there. Then capacity needs to be built for the authorities to understand that, and that needs to be there from the upper level to the implementation level, because then only they'll be able to take bold steps, innovations in terms of design and implementation. So I think these are some of the challenges for scaling up as well as implementation. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Priyanka. And I'll come back to all the speakers in the second round. But now going on to Mr. Shekhar. As you know, one of the biggest challenges that we found while doing this work was the how poor is the quality of the crash data that cities have. It's not systematically collected at all. And also, which then has problems with how we actually plan and design streets, right? So, at the current business as usual model, if we have to change it, what role do you think technology and newer ways of looking at it can help us with the challenge of how crash data is collected in cities?
Okay, thanks, Sudeshna. I think if we were to first of all step away from business as usual, if we can try to address what Dr. Kundu said about driver behavior, right? I would first propose some changes in the way licenses are issued, right? I think just anybody who applies in India can get a license, and you don't know what kind of education they have. Not in terms of school education, but really driving education, right? So that's one. Secondly, I think we have a fantastic model with the Bangalore Traffic Police in the way that they are exploiting the use of AI with the information that they get. If the ULBs can hook onto that data, there's a lot that they can gather from that already. It's quite popular. It's called Astram. So and quite easily within a matter of 3 or 4 days, they can add on newer data points to what the model is already collecting. What we see missing, of course, I don't completely agree with crash data, but I think a lot of information is missing on near misses, right? So you end up looking at fatalities, but not really what can the design change in order to also avoid those near misses. I think going back and studying that data is key. Again, to address the change in business as usual scenario, if it's not in the contract, Sudeshna, I think it will never appear on our streets. So from a design standpoint, I think safety audits should be introduced. The Motor Vehicles Act has now introduced this whole road safety councils at state level, district level. They have to be mobilized. I think they need a lot of capacity building too in order to implement many of these interventions that we're talking about. Of course, the fact that these councils are housed under the Motor Vehicles Act, that again creates a disconnect between the ULBs and them, but I think it's important for them to work together. So I think for safety audits to appear on design contracts as well as implementation contracts, that's the design gate, I would say, and also linking payments to these audits and design measures. So that's something for me. Thanks.
Thank you so much, and also for highlighting the point about non-fatal injuries, and it's not just crashes. Yeah, and that's actually something that we also comment on in the report. Over to you, Felipe. If you can give us some examples from other countries where, you know, these kind of issues of improving data to act on safer streets by design kind of an approach has really been taken to scale and improved cities and made them more livable. Yeah.
Thank you. Before getting to examples, I wanted to start. I know you might have heard of the airplane crash like a month ago or so in Ahmedabad, right? And we were all shocked, and the news with that accident went all over the world immediately after it happens. The truth is, talking about road safety, just in India, the amount of people that dies every day is like if one airplane crashes every single day in India. That's how shocking and how important this topic should be in India and all around the world. We're talking about 1.7 lakh people dying every single day, per year, and 12 lakh in the world. That's a lot of people, and we are not really paying that much attention as it should be. So I completely agree with all what's been said here in this panel in terms of how we sensitize every stakeholder in order so everyone understands not only people in the streets what their responsibility is, but also everyone in the governments and everyone in all the pyramids, so we understand what we have to do, because we cannot blame people for dying on the streets. We all make mistakes. And how do we make sure that the design, from the design point, we can really have better places? And that's where data plays a key role, and that's where I wanted to get to your point in terms of the example of cities. There are many good examples, of course, but probably where all this started many years ago in Sweden. In 2003, they started getting and collecting some data from crashes and what was happening in the streets. In 2016, they started complementing this data with what was happening at the hospitals. And they keep going in terms of tracking and getting police reports, medical reports, autopsy findings, expert crash reconstruction. So with that data, they were able to understand where things happening and why things were happening. So they could in that way achieve the challenge of reducing to zero, which is the perspective that in Sweden started with this vision zero that many other countries have started to have. Another good example is Brazil, where many years ago they had this paper-based information when they collect the information of what was happening on the streets with crashes. They were just recording this on paper, and they decided to change this into a more digitalized information at the national level with a very nice incentive, which is actually that the most accurate information would lead also to more budget, so that budget can be invested in these specific topics. Understanding that the topic is not only, again, road safety. When we're talking about road safety, as been said here, we're talking about pedestrians, we're talking about bicycles, we're talking about designing our streets for people, not for cars. So it's not only about, when we try to focus on the road safety, some people are like, oh, but that's a boring topic. That's not exactly what I want to work on. Well, actually, road safety is everything we have around us. It's road safety. Public space is road safety. It's about road safety. Because the way we design roads for people, then that means that actually we are building for everyone. And I left my hometown, Bogota, for the last example. Because there happened something very similar too. We decided in Bogota that at some point we were going very bad in terms of people dying in our streets. And we found out exactly the same as in Brazil. If we were going to collect data, we had to make the best possible, not only from the public sector, but with the police. So we started combining efforts with the police, and then understanding that that efforts should lead to have and to match the information we had, hospitals had. So we were able to have reports of where, when, to what extent things happened on the street. So we were able to map that in the city, and in that way we know now where the things are happening, where the worst injuries, or where is dying more people in the streets. Let me tell you this very simple story of so before joining Tabora, I was the Secretary of Mobility of Bogota. And in Bogota, in that moment, my team were thinking, of course, of congestion and all these problematics that we have in our cities. And it's very understandable, right? So they came to me, a group of like 30 people, and they told me, look, we need to intervene this specific street, but the only way to intervene it is to reduce one lane. So we ended up doing it because what about congestion? It's terrible. I mean, we cannot do that. So my question back to them was, how many people dies in that specific junction every year? The answer was 13 people. So I told them, really? I mean, 13 people's life, it's more important than some minutes that people will have to wait because of the lane. I know that's not the ideal in any city to have congestion, but life matters much more than any other thing. So the instruction was, they have to redo the thing. And we are reducing the lane, and no matter how much people is going to fight with me, I'm sure explaining that we're saving 13 lives every single year. It's more important. Counting kids and elder people and everyone in the street, that's more important. So definitely making sure that you have data will make you to be able to make these kind of decisions in a better way. If we didn't have the data, my decision would have been, oh no, yes, please prioritize congestion, because I didn't know there were 13 people dying in that street. So data is probably the most important thing you have to have at the first time, at the first step, in order to be able to make decisions. So these stakeholders can be informed, and then from there can make these decisions.
Thank you so much, Felipe, for those really, really wonderful examples. I will now come back to Dr. Kundu again. What a lot of the panelists talked about of how this is such an intersectoral issue, because of course it's a public health issue, lives are concerned. It's also very much today a climate issue. Pretty much all the climate action plans of every cities are talking about building NMT infrastructure at scale. And you previously talked about how there are 20 agencies owning roads in Delhi. So this is a nightmare coordination issue also, right? So how do you work or convince governments vertically, horizontally to coordinate and converge on an important issue like this, where what are the figures for India? Akanksha, in a 437 people die in Indian streets, every day. So 437 people are dying on our streets every day. So
It is being reported, otherwise
exactly. And like Felipe said, that was really his sort of ammunition to, yes, to basically, do whatever was needed to be done. So in this case, how can interministerial coordination, also interdepartmental, interagency coordination be done to make road safety and walkability a shared mandate in cities, to achieve the kind of goal of climate resilient, low carbon resilient cities? And also, maybe you can also comment on some of these project facilities, preparation facilities that we are talking about for bankable projects. Do they also fall in the category of those bankable projects under the Challenge Fund?
Thank you. I think it's a very important question. I have an answer, but I do not know how to what extent policymakers at various levels, vertically and horizontally, would really instill those the way forward going ahead. I think sensitization again is very important across and both vertically and horizontally, and also interdepartmental coordination and understanding that the way fatalities are happening can be restricted if not stalled. Until and unless that way of thinking is really instilled in our policymakers, I think it becomes very difficult. I think people are aware, but when it goes down to implementation, it falls apart somewhere in the policy gaps. I think that is one area where we really need to work. And as many of our co-panelists have mentioned, I think funding, dedicated funding is also essential for that. Again, cross-sectoral data integration, because health and transport data are in silos. So once we integrate that, maybe we start with the 100 ICCCs which are there in our country, which was an offshoot of the Smart Cities mission. So the ICCCs could be the first lever to really integrate the data, the real-time data, and start working on those data and see how we can start working towards creating spaces which are walkable, and also bring the business community in the picture. Because if you look at the streets, most of the walkable spaces are currently occupied by petty businesses, the vendors are there. So even if you would like to walk through the streets, it becomes very difficult. So the business community should also be one of the major stakeholders in the entire conversation. I think that is also very important. And high-level political signaling, I think coordination flows from the leadership. So until and unless we have a national urban mobility and health cell linking design, health outcomes, and also infrastructure, it is very difficult to have a very clear-cut path going ahead. And also shared cross-cutting priority. Across ministries, at the Government of India level, the Chief Secretary's Conference happens every year. I think this needs to come up as an important agenda. We had the Chintan Shivir where you were also there, right, last year. So that's the National Urban Conclave coming up. I think this is one of the pressing issues which needs to be deliberated upon. And even if not across the 10,000 odd urban centers, even if we start piloting in a select few and show to the world that yes, Indian cities can be walkable, can really show or illustrate that we can create spaces for all. I think there is a way out. If we are really heading towards Viksit Bharat by 2047, all stakeholders need to integrate their efforts. It cannot be in silos at the ministerial level and also for people like us at the citizens level. I think there needs to be synergy for a common interest. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for those comments. Going over to you, Gerald, again, if you can tell us about some of your experiences in Chennai working with local government over there, and what had been some of the pathways there for street improvement, what kind of funds, technical capacity, coordination mechanisms, more importantly, were leveraged, and what had been the nature of success?
Okay, so I would start by saying that I'm a bit frustrated because progress has been too slow compared to what Chennai needs, right? I mean, I think they have made good progress on starting the development of complete street, reinventing totally the landscape on some of the streets. But after 3, 4, 5 years, the progress is too slow compared to the hundreds of kilometers that need to be created in Chennai. So two or three elements maybe reflecting on those lessons. One is when a city like Chennai or a metropolitan region like Chennai Metropolitan is creating a comprehensive mobility plan, this is a first step where the metropolitan region can say, look, our vision is to have sidewalks, to have safe environment, to have this and that, and then to allocate at least 5% of the CMP resources towards this goal, right? And that's something that even goes back to the purview of the central government when supporting a metro line, right? So there is a mechanism where embedding that very forcefully with very clear targets comes in as part of a plan. The second is that unless, as Dr. Kundu mentioned rightly, unless it's institutionalized across the various parties working together, it will not move forward, simply. Right? So in Chennai, we have been supporting the creation of this UMTA now for 5 years. It's now fully staffed. It's maybe one of the first in India that has really operationalized itself with 30 plus staff, with police included in that, and working group focused on road safety. So that's the second part, the institutionalization. The third part is, and yeah, I would say that there's something to be thought through in terms of completely shifting the way streets are being designed in India, is that, you know, a lot of the, at least up to 5-10 years ago, a lot of the streets were actually designed as highways by highway engineers who thought as highways and the car needs to move as fast as possible in the urban space. Until you do that, you cannot hold accountable the pedestrian who is trying to go from one side of the street to the other side and has no passageways within a kilometer, and even when there is, you need to go up and down and or underground where it's unsafe. I mean, like, the streets need to fit their urban context, and the urban context has evolved massively. We heard during the session this morning, right? A lot of peri-urban area has become urbanized. So the fundamentals in terms of designing urban street as urban street for the people is something that requires a massive transformation in the mindset of engineers. And I'm an engineer, by the way, so I can so that actually you start having the positive outcome associated with that. Next, related to that, there's been a lot of good work on designs that have been great, right? I mean, actually we did even one with WRI on TOD, safe TOD, like a few years back, and the national government has also published that. Insisting that this is actually implemented is very critical, and everybody needs to voice that, look, these are the guidance. They are not requirement, but they are the guidance that are emitted. When I mentioned the project in Tianjin before, after that, the central government in China issued the guidance on walking and cycling to all the cities, so that they would start changing the mindset as well as you implement. And last, and that's something I do in a new project in Amaravati, we require road safety rating of the street before they get into operation. We also require usability rating by people on wheelchair before the sidewalks are put in operation, so that the sidewalks are actually working for all categories of people. And unless this is part of a package that comes to us, we don't disburse. Right? So I mean, that's a bit brutal, but it's a way of raising the awareness that get it right, really focus on the details, because a lot of these safety issues come from lack of attention to details. A sidewalk that is discontinuous and forces people to walk on the street instead of staying on the sidewalk. How many times, and you have all seen that many times, how many times do you see there is a sidewalk and then people are walking on the street? Why? Well, I mean, because the sidewalk is discontinuous. Every 200 meters there is a big obstacle, then they need to walk back and forth, etc. So last point I would mention, and I think that's a good practice from the Netherlands. Whenever you build a sidewalk, you face the issue that somebody will improve the entrance to their property, right? And what was a nice sidewalk for a short while become demolished, and it becomes part of this patchwork I was describing just now. Well, in the Netherlands, they have very clear guidelines as to how any damage of this kind needs to be repaired back to the standard of the sidewalk you expect, right? So when you budget, it's not just putting an allocation, which usually exists, but making sure that that refurbishment then takes place in line with the expected standard, so that even if you don't have a dedicated project, you actually keep improving up to a certain standard every time a construction takes place. That changes a lot the dynamic, because it also creates a lot of resources. And sorry, I said last, but I have one more thing that struck me in Shanghai. It's very, very complicated to deal with utilities as well as sidewalk. The sidewalk project from a technical point of view is a super simple construction, right? It's nothing, no rocket science. You need to find the space, etc., but nothing complex. The challenge in many cities is that you have legacy systems, you have a lot of underground utilities. You don't necessarily know where they are. There was no 3D GIS system when they were built, and as you build it, you discover them. Or as soon as you have done your sidewalk, another agency comes in and starts scrapping it to, oh, by the way, we need now to lay a new pipe. So there is, and that's back to the point you were raising, there is a need for interagency coordination mechanism that allow 3 to 5 year planning on when these utilities are going to be renovated, so that you can match actually the transformation that will take place underground with what you do above ground. If there's nothing in the next 5 years, then you can rebuild your sidewalk. If there is going to be something, then you can plan it so that it happens after the renovation has taken place. There are good platforms that are now available, and I'm sure NIUA and the ministry can really create a single set of platform that integrates the processes and automate the processes, capture digitally what's happening to make this process much more seamless.
Thank you so much for a very, very comprehensive answer. No, it's fine. Well, Mr. Shekhar, to you now. So within this whole larger agenda of green urban mobility, how can the work on safer streets leverage climate resilience strategies for both mitigation and adaptation by adopting more greener technologies? You had been doing some work on that, so if you can shed some light on that.
Yeah, I mean, we don't really need greener technologies, right? So if you look at the safety geometry, a lot of that is green in the sense that, what the other panelists said, that you need shade, you need permeable verges, you need, seating infrastructure, higher sidewalks to prevent from, risks of falling into drains or whatever, flooding. So so I think that's it is also cost effective, right? It is the simplest way to address your walking infrastructure. So I really don't see that we need to look at technologies per se. These are really going back to the fundamentals. Is what I would say. A couple of data points that came to mind while Gerald was speaking. And I got this from one from CEPT and the other from Geneva. CEPT had recently done a study in Ahmedabad, I think, and 80% of the women that they surveyed chose walking as their primary mode of transportation. But they're not able to because the infrastructure is broken, right? So that's one, and I think if 80% of 50% of your population is choosing to walk, and this, of course, we're not even considering the other 50% and what percentage of that. That's a high number already, right? The other from Janagraha is, I don't know the percentages, but they recently did the survey across a few cities where a lot of women, I think the majority of the women that they surveyed found these streets unsafe, right? So when we look at safety, with the lens of crashes and near misses on the road with in their interaction with vehicles, I think safety as a parameter on the street itself right, where there is lack of lighting, and possibly the sidewalks are also broken, which in Bangalore we see, I mean, practically every rainy season there are cases of people falling into open drains. So yeah, so these things, I think, looking at green infrastructure would really solve this problem. One last example, there's this part of Delhi called Dwarka. It was fantastic sidewalks, wide roads, but not lit at all, right? So, I can imagine women folks saying that they find it unsafe. I mean, I also find it unsafe because you never know from where, you'll have these elements coming out. So, I think we invest a lot in infrastructure. If you look at the CMP numbers, all these targets of 30% of NMT and these non-motorized public transportation, but you don't see that. I think that was clearly visible from your Bombay presentation, that the budgets are not allocated. And a lot of these software infrastructure elements, which don't cost much, are skipped for high cost infrastructure. So these are a couple of my inputs.
Thank you. I'm going to wrap up, ask the same question to both Priyanka and Felipe, because both of you, had been in this practice field for a long time. What would success in the Safer Streets for Tomorrow look like to you? What does success mean?
It's a nice question to wrap up. So I think how I imagine it, and how I look at success in Safer Street is where we are not discussing some of the special projects in streets, and more street design is integral part of planning, governance, and our economic priorities. So that is where I feel that success is for us. And since last 2 decades, citizens have lost their connection with the cities. And that is what we need to get back. Where I feel success would be where children can play back in streets again safely. Elderly are walking around and socializing, and most of their needs are there within 4 kilometers without using private transport. So, and then streets are not just looked upon in the lens from mobility, but also climate resilience and public space. And that's how we will be able to sustain and live together in cities. So, thank you.
It's a very broad question, but because my answer would be like a comprehensive view from everyone understanding their role on the streets, first of all. So if you are using your bicycle, what exactly your responsibility is when you're doing that, when you're using your car, when you're a pedestrian. Because we all know that when we are driving our car, sometimes we say, these bikers, they are such a nightmare. And then when we are using our bicycle, then we think, oh no, these other people, they don't really understand. And depending on who you are and which role you are playing, then you start thinking of the other ones as the responsible for the chaos. So understanding that and making sure that we make that change of understanding things in our people, I think that's one of the things. But of course, that's only like if citizens are the only responsibles for that. But so on the other hand, I think the very important responsibility that we as institutions working on this, decision makers, government has, in terms of making sure that every single design includes road safety, it's absolutely relevant. There is no way that we want people to use metro if we don't design accessibility for the metro, and that means that accessible points should be safe. And when we're talking about accessible points, I'm not talking just about the entrance of the metro, of course. I'm talking about how you get to the metro. I think Gerard mentioned this twice already, and we need networks. It's not only about building a specific piece of road for whatever I'm thinking it's the solution, but it's how I make sure that the whole network I'm building makes sense. I have this great example. I know we are running out of time, but very, very quick. An amazing bike lane, just designed, just launched, and no bikers there. Everyone just biking on the street. Exactly what you were saying with the pedestrians. And when we got to the end of the bike lane, there were some bollards at the end of the bike lane. Of course, someone had a very nice initiative of designing the bike lane. That person, unfortunately, had never used a bicycle in their life, because you don't want to stop your bike when you are on it and get down, cross the street, and then go back to your bike. So you use the street. That's the easy way. So we need to make sure that our designs really respond to the needs of every single user, and that we understand, again, in terms of road safety, that we humans make mistakes. So from the design, we should be saving lives. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
I will give the last word to Dhaval. You've heard all the panelists now, and you've been with this work for over a decade. What do you think? What are your thoughts? Do you feel hopeful? Do you feel frustrated?
I'm very, very hopeful. If I have to, if I have to take the example of Mumbai, and I think many big cities are following there. We are at this moment in Mumbai where we're in the next 4-5 years going to add public transport capacity. And Gerald, I remember you also said, unprecedented. Like the kind of capacity that's only been added 60, 80 years ago. So I think it's imperative, right, that we will have to sort of make Mumbai workable. And if I take Mumbai as example, but I think very, very interesting kind of thoughts from everyone. I think, I just, from Felipe's point when he was Secretary Mobility in Bogota, while the choice he had to make was between pedestrianization and congestion. And very clearly as a decision maker, his choice was pedestrianization for whatever reasons, but one was 30 people shouldn't die there tomorrow. So I think we're at this point where it is in some ways worth this. But as we get there, and I think as more and more practitioners grow, as more people, more literature, and as this community grows bigger, I think it's inevitable, this change. So I'm quite hopeful generally. But yeah, thank you very much to everyone. And I think to Chetan now.
Right. All the panelists, directors. Just to add here, now we are at the special moment where we want to launch the report. So along with the panelists, I would like to invite all the authors who are here from the road safety team as well as others to invite Pawan, our director, to come here. Pawan is our director, integrated transport, clean air, hydrogen, sustainable cities and transport. Please come to the stage, and team, if you can bring the reports on the stage.
Congratulations.
Good evening, everyone. A warm welcome to all of you. We are delighted to have you today to join us for this discussion on strengthening MSMEs for localizing the EV value chain in India. To set the tone of this session, I, Anuja Ramesh Ramugade, Program Associate from the Electric Mobility team, would like to invite Ms. Chaitanya Kanuri, Associate Program Director, Electric Mobility, WRI India, to deliver the opening remarks.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us. We know it is the last session of the day, but we promise to make it an interesting conversation. We have some excellent speakers with us, some of whom have traveled from far away to join us. And we think it's going to be a very well curated session. And I am very excited to get us started off. So I'm just going to provide a little bit of context for us in order to better understand the discussion we'll be having. So we're talking about India's electric mobility journey. It started off at almost 0% in 2017-18. It's at about 7.5% today. And by 2030, we're hoping and projecting from fairly reliable estimates that it will reach 30%. These estimates were made a couple of years ago. Of course, there are ups and downs in the EV ecosystem, but nevertheless, it does seem to be moving regularly forward on an upward trajectory, right? And to support e-mobility deployment in the country, there's been a lot of support that has been provided by the government. There's been various schemes, the FAME scheme, the PM e-drive scheme, various concessions like GST concessions for electric vehicles. On the other hand, even for EV manufacturing, there has been a lot of support provided. The PLI schemes are the notable ones, like the PLI scheme for the advanced cell chemistry cells, as well as the ones for advanced auto and auto component manufacturing. We also have the exemptions in terms of import tax reductions and all on various equipment and material for EV manufacturing, which is also expected and supposed to spur the EV supply side. But there is still a long way to go when we're talking about EV manufacturing, right? So when we talk about auto manufacturing, it is like one of the pride industries of India, one of India's prides, especially in the manufacturing sector. I think the auto industry comprises around almost half of India's manufacturing GDP and 7% of its overall GDP. So it's always been an important sector, one in which India has over time excelled, and one in which we have reached almost complete localization. Many of the cars on Indian roads are actually at 95% levels of localization, which is almost complete. And as we are transitioning towards EVs, we're finding that this is not quite the case. Large parts of the EV powertrain, especially the batteries and the various power electronics, which are becoming more and more sophisticated, are not yet localized. They are in process, but there will need to be a lot of further growth towards that. OEMs and tier 1 companies, which are the auto manufacturers and the large system component manufacturers, are already diversifying. They're already investing in EVs. Most major manufacturers today have both an ICE vehicle and EV division, and we also have some startups that have started with EV. However, when you look at the tier 2 and tier 3 companies, many of which are MSMEs, micro, small and medium enterprises, we find that the picture is very different. Many of them are not necessarily localizing, and some are, of course, as their OEMs localize, their supply chains and their suppliers are localizing. But we have 35,000 to 45,000 MSMEs in the auto component manufacturers. They comprise about 75% of our total auto component manufacturers. And there are many reasons most of them are not localizing. One is a lack of resources for actually investing in diversifying to EV manufacturing. There's also, in some cases, a lack of industry sentiment according to them, or a lack of market access. They don't know who they're going to sell their products to if they do move into EV component manufacturing. And finally, in many cases, what we hear from industry is a lot of MSMEs are satisfied where they are, and unless they don't necessarily want to grow. However, if we don't have MSMEs growing, we do know that when we reach 30% EVs, we'll have around at that time, out of a 5 crore EV auto market, 1.5 crores will be EVs. So there is going to be a gradual shift, and there is a social imperative to ensure that there are pathways for these MSMEs as their economy either stagnates in the ICE or diminishes or slows down in its growth. There needs to be other pathways for them to transition to, either within or outside the auto sector. And the fact is, it is a growing industry globally. So there is an economic imperative in addition to the social imperative as well. If India is going to retain its competitiveness as an auto manufacturing hub, we have to accept the realities of EVs and zero emission vehicles becoming a transition point, and we need to learn to develop the necessary expertise in those technologies. And a lot of that expertise and specialization, while today OEMs are trying to develop in-house, if we need to become a global hub which can support export demands of the world and everything, we need to also ensure our MSMEs are equipped to do it. This is why WRI India, we have been working at the ground level. So we know that state and national policies are stimulants. They can make things happen, but you need to ensure that the capacities are there and the potential is there and the opportunities are there at the ground level. And we have found that this is possible in auto manufacturing clusters, where you have a big spatial concentration of companies that are working on auto manufacturing, as well as local economies that are dependent on the auto industry. And so they have an imperative to actually move towards a planned approach that will ensure their economy continues to grow. So we've been working with local industry associations who are the main spearheads at the local level, at the cluster level, to support the development of cluster transition plans and various initiatives that are looking at skilling, at the development of common infrastructure centers, at financing initiatives, a range of initiatives to actually create a cohesive ecosystem for MSMEs to thrive. And that is what today's conversation will be about. So I welcome you all to it again, and I'd like to hand back to Anuja to take the session forward.
Thank you so much, Chaitanya, for setting the context and explaining the rationale behind the project on which WRI India is working in Pune and Chhatrapati Sambhajinagar cluster. I'll quickly take you all through a short presentation that will explain what work we are doing right now in the clusters. The project right now has threefold objectives. We start with understanding the challenges that MSMEs are facing in their EV diversification journey. Post which, since we are working in the cluster, we want to develop a roadmap with actionable recommendations that will enable manufacturing of EV components. And additionally, we also want to implement some solution initiatives in these clusters that can support MSMEs and the ecosystems directly. To ensure that our efforts are based in local realities, we have interacted with multiple stakeholders. These are not only MSMEs, but also industry associations, solution providers such as skilling agencies, incubation centers, and financiers. And obviously the OEMs who are the ultimate customers of these MSMEs. Additionally, after taking inputs from these MSMEs, whatever ideas we have, whatever potential solution initiatives that we have thought of, we have tested them in focus group discussions where these stakeholders were present. One such initiative that we implemented in Chhatrapati Sambhajinagar was a bill of material workshop. This workshop was identified as the first step towards awareness and capacity development of automotive industry stakeholders by differentiating the components and materials used in EVs and ICE vehicles. In this workshop, we also exhibited some key EV components, so the participants got a look and feel of these components, and it could be easier for them to identify entry point in the EV value chain. Further, in the Pune cluster, the workshop in the Pune cluster exposed MSMEs to the upcoming technology shifts in the electric mobility, and also gave an idea about potential diversification pathways, upskilling opportunities, and the financing available, and specifically the common infrastructure available in these regions. This was achieved through various technical sessions, and we had a panel discussion with OEMs, Eka Mobility, and Newton Auto. Aarti Parigi ma'am will be joining us for the panel discussion as well.
In addition to this workshop, we have implemented one solution initiative at the Chhatrapati Sambhajinagar cluster already. Our CSN team worked to support Devgiri Electronics Cluster, which is a common facility center, through secondary research, consultation with these industry experts. A report titled "Accelerating EV Transition" was published. This report creates a clear roadmap to upgrade the DECPL facility into a EV-ready CFC that will help the MSMEs and startups integrate into emerging EV supply chains. So while we are working to develop the capacity of MSMEs, we have not forgotten the other end of this issue, which is identifying practices of OEMs and large tier 1 auto component enterprises that can maximize the strategic value of MSMEs and their partnership in the EV localization journey. So we are currently conducting this research, and our key objective is to identify these practices that OEMs have taken. Alongside this, we are also studying practices from other sectors that are undergoing transitions to see what lessons or models can be adopted for the EV space. So there are multiple challenges that MSMEs who is trying to diversify into EV value chain face, including non-availability of the EV machinery, to not being able to comply to the certification standards and quality or scale of the demand that comes from the OEMs. So all these issues could be addressed through collaboration between the various tiers of the supply chain, and OEMs and the last tier ones play a very important role in it. So from these both ends, from building capacity of MSMEs to also working with OEMs to understand in what ways they can support MSMEs in their diversification journey, our project currently comprises of our entire team, and we are working on this issue. Some of the few things that are in the pipeline are common portal for shared infrastructure, some skilling initiatives, and the cluster transition plan that will develop a clear roadmap for the MSMEs. So with this, I'd like to show you a video, and let's hear from the stakeholders in this cluster itself.
In 2024, we sold almost 2 million EVs, which accounted for about 7.5% of all vehicles. MSMEs comprise about 75% of all auto component manufacturing enterprises. And ensuring that they are able to diversify to EV manufacturing will be essential to ensuring a just and equitable transition.
MSMEs are always driven, literally, by the OEMs. And MSMEs in Pune are adjusting well to the change from working only for ICE engine components to the EV components.
We have 80% infrastructure available in Chhatrapati Sambhajinagar for EV manufacturing. The challenges remains about the manpower.
Availability of the manpower at the right qualifications को एक challenge हमेशा रहता है. इसके लिए हम लोगों ने अपडेट्स को ट्रेनिंग दिया, उनको एम्पावर किया कि ये तेरा मशीन से तेरे को ही चलाना है.
You have 4 of engineering schools, they have great talent right here in Pune. And then you have this institutional architecture in terms of the auto cluster, ARAI, MECF, MCCI.
MSME have to develop this technology, they have to maintain the standards, they have to develop excellence. For that, Marathon Auto Cluster is giving them support in terms of technology and in terms of skilled manpower.
The initiative that WRI has taken is an important one for a simple reason, that they are the only ones who are working on this part.
Pune and Sambhajinagar are just 2 clusters amongst many in India that will need to transition to EVs. But these 2 clusters can lay the foundation for others in order to adapt it to their own context and continue to stay thriving and competitive in the new EV space.
Much of the value addition in the supply chain is done by the MSMEs. And if you help them, it will help you, the OEM, to do even better. And it helps the nation, per se, in achieving the goals and targets that we have.
We now move on to the heart of today's session, the panel discussion. I am pleased to introduce our distinguished panelists. May I request them to join the stage. Mr. Arindam Lahiri, CEO of Automotive Skill Development Council. Mr. Prashant K. Banerjee, Executive Director of Society Prashant Banerjee, Society of Indian Automobile Manufacturers. Ms. Aarti Paregi, Co-founder and Managing Director of Newton Auto Private Limited. Mr. Vivek Dhawan, Chief Strategy Officer, Omega Saki Mobility. Mr. Ashish Gadde, Director, Marathwada Accelerator for Growth and Incubation Council. And Mr. P. Ponram, Honorable Treasurer, Coimbatore District Small Industries Council, Association. And our moderator for session, Ms. Anuradha Ranganath. With that, I hand it over to Anu to guide us through this discussion.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Abja, and thank you, Chaitanya. I think the context was really well said. I welcome you all to the panel, Strengthening MSMEs for Localizing the EV Value Chain in India. As we gear up towards our clean mobility goals, the role of MSMEs become extremely crucial. I welcome the panelists today who are driving the change on the ground, and I'm grateful for them traveling from wherever they've come, and they've also invited people on our behalf, so thank you very much, sir. Thank you, ma'am, as well. Together we will explore how state-level initiatives, industry-government collaborations, and capacity-building efforts can enable MSMEs to become active players in the EV value chain. I'd like to invite Mr. Prashant K. Banerjee to come in. Sir, we've been toying this idea of a secondary supplier initiative where we give some boundary conditions to say some child parts and create a movement for OEMs to bring in this thought or an idea for a secondary supply initiative. Can you please come in on your thoughts on this aspect?
First of all, thank you very much, and I'm very happy that WRA is doing such a wonderful work. The growth of auto industry is very, very closely linked with the secondary suppliers' growth. I think no OEM can thrive and be competitive until they really support, handle, and develop the secondary supplier. Whether it's a conventional business or it's a EV, EV is more relevant because nobody is aware about what is being produced, what is being designed, and how it is being developed. So I think it's very, very important, whether it's a two-wheeler, three-wheeler, or four-wheeler, or bus. Everywhere you would see every OEM is hand-holding the MSME. The tier ones are the one which are perhaps supporting you on a very high-end technology stuff. But to begin with, for example, battery pack. Initially, even the battery pack were actually imported. But the first thing happened is the battery pack localization. And that was done by the, again, secondary suppliers. They were supported by OEMs. Then the next level, when you talk about then small controllers, the small items which are large in number being made. So if you look at simple even wiring harnesses, so in Tata Motors, there is a Grihini, a small unit where ladies actually support the various components which are easy to make, but very precise hands are required to create and support. Similarly, if you look at the two-wheeler, TVS, or maybe in Pune, Bajaj, I think there you will find everywhere small components are being actually developed with the help of local secondary suppliers. So I think that is a very integral part of the journey which India is undertaking in migrating to electrified mobility.
Thank you very much, sir. We do know with child parts, I think OEMs and startups do want to go with the most cost-effective part. But in the long term, we need to make everybody realize that the cost trade-off is just short-term. But in the long-term benefit, it's better we're self-reliant and educate our MSMEs to do all the child parts ourselves. So thank you very much for that response. I'd like to bring in Ms. Aarti Paregi, who's been actively contributing to India's EV manufacturing landscape. What unique opportunities do you see startups like Newton Auto collaborating with MSMEs and also strengthening the EV supply chain, ma'am?
Thank you so much, WRI and Anuradha, for reaching out. I think, firstly, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Aarti Parigi. We have founded an electric bus OEM. We're a startup. That itself defines disruption. That you would have an electric bus startup that is setting up an ecosystem in Pune, which is an established automotive hub. One of the things that when we walk into a room, they say that, when there are such established OEMs, why would you take this on, right? Why would you set up? But our entire ecosystem that we are supporting, the supply chain ecosystem, coming out of Maharashtra, we are 80% MSMEs that are supporting us. And we are an MSME as well. So that itself says that, this is something that we need to support. Looking at the demand that is building up in EVs, especially e-buses, most of the incumbents already have, their order books full. So it is time to support the startups and build on it. So talking about what is the support we would look for. We're all MSMEs who have compliances that you need to adhere to, and that takes a huge toll. Certain other issues with regards to infrastructure availability is something that we could have some policy support. We were just discussing on facts like how can clusters be enhanced. Maharashtra has always been focused on developing clusters. You do see that, but then how do you build some homogeneity in the clusters? So I'll just stop there and maybe we could pick on.
I think what you said is crucial to whatever we were talking about today. I think that's a great segue to going to Mr. Ashish Gade. Sir, ma'am spoke just now about the cluster development. Can you speak a little bit about what steps Sambhajinagar has taken for this EV transition? And if you wish, you could also share the experience of ideating and creating the solution initiatives for towards the EV ecosystem as well, please.
Yeah, at the outset, I would like to thank WRI for selecting Chhatrapati Sambhajinagar for the intervention for this Just EV transition. And it has happened at a perfect timing since there are many large OEMs who are now investing in Chhatrapati Sambhajinagar, that's Aurangabad. Like Pune, Aurangabad or Chhatrapati Sambhajinagar also is a prominent auto component manufacturing destination, auto hub. We already have large establishment of Bajaj Auto Limited and their vendors. So the ecosystem as far as auto components is concerned is quite mature in the region. Through our industry association, that is Chamber of Marathwada Industries and Agriculture, CMI, we have already established 2 common facility centers at Chhatrapati Sambhajinagar. These common facility centers are targeted at MSME industries in the region. Basically, these clusters are established for ensuring these MSMEs become globally competitive. Incidentally, Chhatrapati Sambhajinagar ranks 37 in terms of exports, and predominantly it is on account of auto component. So, intervention like just transition for EV in Chhatrapati Sambhajinagar is very relevant, and for that, since we have started working with WRI team, we have identified the potential MSMEs who are looking for this transition. Like the whole exercise started with awareness session and that has taken up good shape. Going forward, as Anu just now mentioned, we have also figured out how Devgiri Electronic Cluster can be further strengthened and developed into a EV common facility center also, so that many testing and other facilities which are otherwise difficult for MSMEs and like traveling to Pune or any other destination is not that feasible. If such facilities can be offered locally, the local MSMEs would definitely benefit out of such initiatives.
Thank you, sir. I think needless to mention, one of the barriers that when the team went out and spoke to all these MSMEs was definitely how capital intensive was to invest in EV testing, EV manufacturing, and also prototyping. So with common test centers and common facility centers coming in, this will only help the MSMEs. It's in addition to the technology upgrade, I think skilling is an important factor we have to talk about. Skilling is at the heart of localization. So, Mr. Arindamani, I'd like you to come in, please, and talk about what skill gaps are you seeing. MSMEs and ASDs already working on a lot of programs, development programs towards it. So if you could please come in and comment on these.
Thank you. Good afternoon to all of you. It's always a pleasure to be back with WRI team. At the skilling, ecosystem, whenever we have new technology transitions, it itself creates a lot of different gaps. And then, of course, a transition that we have into EV and EV components, it's a much more difficult transition for a lot of MSMEs who are used to delivering services to either like tier 1 component suppliers or assembly suppliers or OEMs. Because when we look at MSMEs, there are two kinds of MSMEs that I would tend to look at. One is the product focused MSME. So they select a particular child part or a particular product family in which they focus as a small scale unit or a medium sized unit, and they kind of build a core competency around that. The second type of MSME would be focused on a process based MSME. So they focus on a particular process of manufacturing or conversion in which they build a core competency around it. So just to give you a very simple example, in the earlier years, a lot of MSMEs came up in a space called protective coating or powder coating area. Because that appeared to be something where MSMEs had a very natural edge in terms of delivering it when it comes to whatever level of components or assembly parts that one needs to supply in. So when we talk about EV skill gaps transitions, we are talking about a lot of, when you say battery, battery might be a very difficult proposition for an MSME to work on. But when you look at a battery management system and a battery pack and that whole subsystem, I would say, in the vehicle, there are a lot of elements. There could be hinges, there could be nuts, there could be whatever, even mechanical parts. A lot of people, for excitement's sake, will talk more about electronics parts, but I'm saying that there is a whole lot of complex parts that we need, lightweighting parts we need in terms of traditional processes. So MSMEs will need to identify what are these areas that they need to go into, and then look at a skilling and a reskilling of their existing manpower from there. A lot of time people say, where do I get skilled manpower from? And the focus always seems to be outside of my organization. When you already have a pool of people who are sitting inside your organization, how do you do reskilling of those people? That should be your first priority. And a lifelong learning in a world today where we are seeing a constant change of technology, that process itself in the Indian context is not very present. And that is something which is very important for us to address.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to bring in Mr. Ponram, sir. So, your cluster has been through one round of transition, if you would allow me to say that. So, from your perspective, can you talk about some of the strengths the MSMEs have already demonstrated and how these can be amplified, focusing on the EV ecosystem?
Thank you, WRI, for this opportunity. We started this intervention about 3 years back because Coimbatore is an engineering hub. We have got a lot of automotive component manufacturers in Coimbatore. They are catering to the domestic and international market. When EV transition and EV talks started about 30% vehicle will be transferred to EV. We analyze the challenges which is going to be faced by the MSMEs in Coimbatore. So we analyzed our strength. Main strength is they are very agile and they can take fast decisions and they can adapt to the market demands because they are very lean. They can take immediate decisions. It's owner driven mostly. So they don't have to wait for a long time. So transition was very easy. And we have analyzed the strengths and it can be fitted into the local manufacturing. MSME can fit into the local supplies. It need not be, OEMs need not source from large suppliers and faraway places. So the logistic cost would be less. So we thought this is the right combination and venture into that. And we strengthened the strength. Most tentatively, Coimbatore is very popular for making motors and pumps. We had the intervention with pump manufacturers and we have developed them as a EV motor manufacturer. This was the real strength we have done. And we are into chassis manufacturing. And especially we have got the international technology also. And in the next round, I will tell them about the latest developments in the what is happening in Coimbatore cluster. And MSME with the available strength, they can venture into motors, controllers, power electronics, and battery management system, and mainly the charging stations. And they can build and operate charging stations in the urban and unserviced area also is possible. In the villages also nearby, they can operate, build and operate. These are all the opportunities and strengths for MSMEs, especially in the southern side, which we have understood. Thank you for the, I'll come back in the next one.
Thank you. I think it's quite evident that the transition does happen in phases, right? We looking at the child parts, look at the easy parts, where you can transition from your current process to the new ones, and then go to a sub-assembly and then final an assembly. So it's a, I think, phase-wise staggered process that we all need to be cognizant that it will take time, but the more support MSMEs get from the industry and skilling support as well, I think that's what they need. Mr. Vivek Dhawan, I'd like to invite you, sir. University has been vocal about building an indigenous EV supply chain throughout. From your experience, what's been some of the biggest breakthroughs in localizing components?
Yeah, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for having me here today. So I think if you look at the Vahan portal numbers as we sit today. So I think in the two-wheeler space we are almost penetrated to 7%. On the L5 segment, we are very active. We are around 12%. And if we actually add the L3 numbers also, so we are more than 50%, right? So we are going to do that, I would say without a very considerable localization. So there has been a lot of dependence on critical metals, minerals from countries like China. And I am very strong opinion that if we actually want to do 30% by 2030 without localization, it seems difficult. I think all of you must have seen the biggest three-wheeler and two-wheeler manufacturer, EV manufacturer, last month was, I think they would like to forget the month of August. Everyone knows that name, right? So I think without localization, it won't be possible to scale up further. But it is not easy. It is not easy. I think, as my co-panelist also discussed, I think we should be very focused on identifying the child parts which needs to be developed. And I think this is a journey, right? You can't do everything, as you start doing today. Couple of examples, one breakthrough which we are trying to bring around is eliminate all, the rare earth magnet motors, right? Why can't we do electromagnets? Why can't we do ferrite motors, right? Those are bulkier, heavier, but a little more, cost efficient. But it actually takes care of, the disruptions related to the motors. In fact, we are also suffering because of the festival season coming forward. We have a huge order book, but we see end of the road by 15th of October. So that is why we are very, very focused on doing that on a very, very early basis, right? The second thing, I think we should start working on not on the battery part, because we have already committed ourselves to a specific chemistry, right? It is not possible to change that technology so easily. But within those batteries, if we identify certain child parts like the connectors, like the electrolytes within the battery, so I think that would be the next step. But there is still some unanswered questions in terms of the critical metals, for which we will still remain dependent on some of the countries. But this is something which we need to start today if we want to actually meet our objective of meeting 30% by 2030. Yeah.
Thank you. One of the things you take pride in is that your battery is completely made in India as well, right? That's what sourced the entire battery pack.
Yeah, so I think batteries are, I would say, are being packed in India, but we have still some dependence outside for cells, and but government also pushing that initiative. So we will have the indigenous cells also very soon. And for a millennium, the most important thing is to actually develop those supply chain clusters around your plant. The biggest and the best example was the Maruti Suzuki. When we see the area of Gurgaon, Manesar, that was developed along with the suppliers. So that is the second thing which we are also planning to do. Identify child parts, start developing them, and start developing them around your plants, so that you reduce cost also, and your supply chain becomes much better and efficient. Yeah.
Thank you. So the next question is open for anybody to answer. Cost, quality, time is the key metrics that most OEMs products always measure. Not considering it as a trade-off, but can we put in localization as one of the metrics for design, development, and manufacturing, but not hindering cost, quality, time? So I'd like you to comment on that, how it becomes a culture in most companies.
To me? Yeah. So I think as we discussed, this is extremely important. For me, it is not the fourth metric. If we talk, as we talk today. So, the idea of EVs, and particularly in the segments where we operate, so the idea of EV is already sold. Fortunately, we have no issues, on the demand side, right? We have been getting orders. We have positioned our products in line with the traditional ICE vehicles, and we are actually able to demonstrate the total cost of ownership and the ROI to our customers, right? But for me, localization obviously is extremely important, right? Extremely important as we scale forward. And for me, this is as an organization and as an active three-wheeler supplier, it has to be our first priority as of now. Otherwise, we may face certain disruptions as we move forward. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd just like to add to that, saying that when you develop with a component, this cost kind of counters the capacity to scale. So that journey where you get it certified, get the MSME to go along and move with you. So though, like Sir rightly mentioned, that MSMEs are agile, they're resilient, they're keen to, grow their business. But when you develop and co-develop, the time taken through the certification process in building the capacity and the capability of the team around, there is a shortfall there, and that can be quite capital intensive. So if you see a range of MSMEs who are moving in that direction to strengthen a supply chain for a certain OEM, you might see a few dropping off and not making it in the next circle. So we are seeing, however, if you divide components, because between two-wheelers, three-wheelers, bus segment, and even passenger vehicles, I think in the EV segment, they are completely different component suppliers who are supporting the ecosystem in certain cases. So if you look at the interior and the interior trims, I think you can find them moving ahead without much disruption. But when you look at the powertrain and the components that go with that and the mechanical components, we're seeing some development costs that come with each OEM's transaction. And that might also hinder the ability to scale.
Thank you. Anybody else wants to come in for this?
You mentioned about development, design, and manufacturing. And in that process, especially if we are discussing about MSMEs, the common facility centers or the clusters can play a big role, because most of the MSMEs can't do that kind of huge investments for new product development and testing or other things. So if that part is taken care by the common facility center, the journey of MSMEs could be swift and they could be like easily they can develop those components and be suppliers to the OEMs.
Absolutely. One is creation of these test centers, and another is also creating awareness of that, because when the team went out and did the entire research in Pune, we realized there's so many testing centers in Pune. So now one of the solution initiatives, of course, putting them all together for people to be aware that there's so many facility centers. When we interviewed the MSMEs, the awareness was not there as much as we'd hoped. Another question for any of you can take this, please. One of the solution interventions that we discussed, which was popular in our focus group in Pune, was also the collaboration between MSMEs and startups. Can you comment on how we would go ahead with something like this? Most of the skilling does happen on job, in addition to, like you mentioned, sir, in addition to the skilling programs. But if you'd like, any of you can take this. But
I think, especially emerging area like electric vehicle, the role of startups will be very important in terms of the MSMEs, because MSMEs may bring in some amount of experience of having, delivered products, created a business model around it. But a startup, what is a startup? To my mind, a startup is something which is looking at solving an existing problem. Now, just to give you an example, what Ashwini was talking about in terms of, common facilities center, and, we talk about special machineries, testing equipments, etc., that are required in a common facility center. So common facility center at an initial stage will be quite helpful. But during that phase, we also need startups who can come and solve the problem of getting specialized, let's say, equipment designs which are not dependent on imports, but are designed here, manufactured here, and are used here, which makes it much more affordable for the MSMEs to be able to use it. So somewhere that cycle has to catch on, in terms of that process, and therefore MSMEs talking to startups, giving them the challenges, the problems, and then startups coming back and trying to solve that is an interactive, collaborative process, and obviously that cycle itself also needs a fair amount of skilling as well. in terms of being able to solve for those specific particular problems.
Do I see some sort of a framework coming out, MSME startup collaborative? Maybe.
Can I add something to this?
Of course.
Based on our experience at Chhatrapati Sambhajinagar, like the ecosystem matters in the whole process. It's not only about MSMEs or incubate startups. What we are seeing at Aurangabad is like incubators, common facility centers, even the industry associations. If they come together and address this particular issue, the ecosystem is quite strong. And MSMEs alone, like unless they get support from industry association, their morale or the confidence level that goes up if the association is backing these MSMEs. And whatever little bit coordination is required, maybe with government or with any even OEMs also, industry association can play a pivotal role, incubators, common facility centers, and if all are integrated, it's a perfect situation.
Yeah, innovation clusters are the way forward. And I think it's a common theme in all the sessions we're looking at, that nothing can be achieved in silo. It's all a collaborative effort. I'd like to open questions from the audience. Of course, yes. We have Mr. Pawan here.
This question is from Mr. Banerjee.
Yeah. Very interesting discussion. So I was just wondering, given that we have been doing this MSME analysis in the EV space, we are actually at a junction. We are talking about alternative fuels, right? Like multiple fuels actually coexisting in India, looks like, right? We're talking about biofuels, we're talking about EVs, and I'm talking about road transport. And we'll have fuel continue. In this context, Prashant, my question is, how would you even talk about an MSME transition? Because where is the visibility of demand, the pipeline? Because as the policies are also evolving, there's also a certain room to maneuver for, tier 1, tier 2 suppliers to really also, or component manufacturers to make this change. What kind of certainty can be brought through policies to actually create this transition? Because it's very challenging, and we were also having this discussion that how do you tell them to just kind of switch to this e-mobility transition when you're talking about so many external factors that's happening? So, and also certain insights that you may have that you can share in public domain would be really helpful in terms of the transition that's likely going to happen.
Thank you, Pawan. I never realized that I am here to face your question, but nonetheless, I know Chaitanya very well. So, I think it's a very important question, and we should be mindful that India's aspiration to become developed nation by 2047 has in its wake the challenge of not only our design, development and product creation capability is one side. Second is the necessary skill set available for us, manufacturing competitiveness and the tools to achieve that, whether it's jigs and fixtures and dies to semiconductor and electronic components availability and the know-how, and then finding a market also to become not only domestic centric, where we are thinking that today we have 4.3 million annual four-wheelers, which could be maybe 6 million around 2030, and also where we are today, say 20 million two-wheelers, so maybe we will go to 30 million, something like that. So even though this domestic centricity of the market may not get us where we want to go, so therefore this local for global and global market export need to expand. So in the export market, if you see, if you are to play, then you have to be mindful what's a global trend. Domestic market, to some extent, you can control its nature, but when the globe is your market, you have to be very clear that all the multi-path, multi-fuel powertrain options you must expertise yourself. We are very proud to tell you that today two-wheeler ICE competitiveness of Indian manufacturers are so important and so vibrant that more than 145 countries our two-wheelers are getting exported, and we are having a good control in Latin American market, in African market, Asian market. Now there actually that space has been actually left open by the Chinese because they focus most of the time on the electric vehicle. But now it's very heartening to see that India's effort to electrify mobility and whatever penetration you see, it's a confident penetration of two-wheelers. So whether you say iQube or Chetak or Vidas and Aethers or Olas, I think it's a confident product experience. And once you have experienced, the second comes the manufacturing competitiveness, supply chain assurance, and that's where we failed. So it's such an integrated, industry that every one screw is not available, that means you can't make the product. And that's where this rare earth magnet challenge you are facing. But PMP and DAV calculation for PLI, both of them, Government of India very carefully created. Look at what happens now. At the 6% or 10% penetration itself, you realize that how geopolitical uncertainty can disrupt your, story. So therefore, you see this example of not so much dependent on the neo-BDM or the samarium based rare earth magnets, where you may have a Tesla values of 1.2 to 1.4, but you need not really create that Tesla energy density or maybe the temperature sensitivity where you have a tellurium or maybe other product which is you are not having. You live with a certain different level of temperature sensitivity so that your coefficient of bearing the temperature without losing the magnetic effect can be compromised with. So I think what solution you see in India, that not just simply copy pasting your rare earth magnets which are getting now restricted. You live with maybe strontium and ferrite based some solutions which are giving you maybe 0.8, 0.6 Tesla. You are still living with your low powered two-wheeler mobility solutions because your masses are looking for mobility without environmental compromise. So as long as you are able to provide with that kind of innovative solutions, I believe that we have captured one area for which we have gone for. So today I am very proud to tell you, look at this rare earth disruption have caused quick focus on our R&D, and there are companies who have been struggling, but now they are ready with the solutions of maybe ferrite based motor. So like that we will have to find our strength and realize our weakness. If we know our weakness, that is our biggest strength. And that's where I believe that all the stakeholders must collaborate. And the way India is progressing, all the powertrain options have a place. Yesterday only the Supreme Court's mandate on E20 journey has been vindicated. So therefore now we have a chance that we have to redeem our destiny and glory with the electrified mobility. And I think we are on the right track. We have challenges. For example, if you talk about institutional purchases, bus and trucks, there we have a challenge of ECU localization or maybe a traction motor controller localization, because you have a volume challenge. There the investment will have to be then do maybe in a consortium manner, maybe extraordinarily supported by the government, but that has to happen. Today, if you look at from MSME, only 0.5% of R&D fund is being, it's a transactional relationship of OEM and MSMEs. It has to change. It has to become an innovation-based, relationship where they should be facilitated to create some new products for the future. So I am sure that people are recognizing that, and OEMs are hand-holding MSMEs. Government is also coming to pitch in with funding, soft loan. Prime Minister's this Rozgar Yojana is there. There are some other kind of, we are having in Vigyan Bhavan some MSME event. There also some funding is being provided. So it's a kind of integrated system on which I believe things are moving, and very positive sign I have that we will be moving in a Atmanirbhar Bharat mode.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We have a question
I have a
from this gentleman here. I think he had his hands up before. And then we'll come to you as well. Yeah.
Hi, this is Praveen from WRI India. And my question is for Mr. Vivek. You mentioned about the rare earth magnet based motor that we can just look for the alternatives, whatever is available, the other possible options. So how much you see the compromise on the performance and its impact on the performance and lifespan of the battery? And the second part, do you see this as a short-term solution? Because in long term, we need to have the capability on the permanent magnet-based motor, because these are not only important for EVs, this is required for the other sectors also, such as wind or other applications. So don't you see that industry or startup should collaborate with the institutions having the lab skill technology and work with them to helping them in scaling those solutions for the commercial scale?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for highlighting this. I think on the first point, transitioning from the current motors to lightweight motors actually comes with a lot of challenges, right? As you rightly highlighted. So first and foremost, within the same rating of the motor, you need actually to build up your motor in terms of capacity because you find a lower efficiency. The second challenge is, like we need cargo vehicles. If you actually put a motor which is 10 kg, higher in weight, so that actually brings your, payload capacity down, right? So we have to actually make all those adjustments. The third thing and the most challenging thing for us is to make all those mechanical adjustments in the vehicle. And we actually have to go back to the drawing board and redesign, the entire placement of your critical components, right? So it's not easy, but we don't have any solution as we look forward as we see today. But there has been some good workings we have been seeing through the news, Prime Minister talking to China, the supply chain meeting is done, but still that is still not really the long run, right? There is long way thought of moving in that direction. But as we rightly said, yes, on the performance side, so we need to make a bigger motor to show the same kind of performance. We have still not tested it thoroughly with the batteries, right? So we have to see what kind of fluctuations in terms of the current which are running through motors are in comparison with the motors which we see. So that is something which will come out very soon. But with the alternative advanced BMS which we use, we will be able to take care of that. So that is something which actually has plus points also, but one thing which actually assures seamless supply chain. And we discussed the three-wheel induction we actually really have, and having penetrated close to 15%. And in fact, if you look at the last month's figures, so we were around 70,000 three-wheelers on a monthly basis. If you combine all the vehicles, EVs, petrol, diesel, and CNG. And we actually have 20,000 EVs, which is approximately 50%, right? And now, when actually saying that we should know how to take a flight while flying, right? So we have to take that flight, and we can't actually let our customers down. We can't let the confidence which we have in them in the entire ecosystem, right? So we have to keep an explanation going around that initiative, right? So the second part of the question, I think, difficult to answer, I would say. So I think it has to be sort of a mismatch that I actually see today, right? But I think in the long term, as a country, so our dependency on these critical metals need to become zero. In fact, I'm very strong opinion that we as a country, needs to also mention our capability, we have the skill set, we have the intent to actually make India, develop this continent locally and then supply them globally. That is what I look at it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Please avoid eye contact and see your question. They'll take your mic away. Your time out.
Yeah, sure. So the question is for Larry sir. So you said like reskilling is required in the EV industry. So like most of the founders just focusing on their startups, building the things. So generally, if I'll say the colleges students, so they doesn't know like how to get reskilled in this particular thing so that they can match up the industry level. So what's your like initiative or how MSME is filling this particular gap, and if there is a private entity, like what should be the approach for them?
No, you're right that it's not a very straight linear solution that somebody will just want to do a reskill and gets a reskilling done. Maybe some of the basics gets covered in some of the standard organizations who are offering these training programs. But at the end of the day, this skilling initiative will definitely need a lot more collaboration between the institutions, the academia, the MSME, the OEM and the tier 1 experts who are there, because MSMEs focus a lot more on the manufacturing per se, the conversion process generally. If you look at, we still don't have a very strong, let's say, an engineering services or design services kind of an MSME group or a cluster. That's yet to build up. So a lot of their technology understanding today is limited to the experts availability which are available either internationally or with the help of the technology providers who are at the OEM level or the large manufacturer or the large producers who are there. So these will require, we are talking about a large thing called an EV. If I take a very small thing which is used not only in EV but even in IC engine, today sensor manufacturing and designing of sensor itself is a big challenge in this country. And we know how many, millions and billions of sensors are getting used not only in auto but in every kind of devices today. And we are struggling. And the core still gets imported. All we are doing is assembling of these units, whatever sensor manufacturing is happening today. So it's a journey, it's a learning journey, and what I mentioned about reskilling is more about the mindset shift. Today in our mindset in working population is generally that I have finished my education, I have entered work life, and there is no education. That has to change. That fundamentally has to change.
Sir, but work life के लिए भी तो वक्त तो मिलना चाहिए, मतलब skills match करेंगी तभी तो.
Yeah, I think that was a great question, the first one. We'll carry on later on.
We'll catch up offline.
And yes, there is another question, but we'll do it after the session, please. We are really timed out, and I hope today's conversation sparks new ideas, partnership, and we continue to strengthen our MSMEs. Over to Anuja.
Ladies and gentlemen, now we move on to a very special segment, the launch of WRI India's latest working paper titled Projected EV Transition in Indian Automotive Manufacturing Industry, Perceptions and Enterprise Level Strategies. May I kindly request the co-authors, Trineni Sen, Priya Bansal, Pranusha Kulkarni and Chaitanya Kanuri to join us on the stage. To commemorate this launch, may I request the authors and our panelists to join us for a group picture. This paper assesses the EV transition perceptions and the response strategies among OEMs and auto component manufacturers of different sizes from the major automotive clusters in India. Based on this assessment, the paper maps the evolving manufacturing processes and related changes in the skill set, demand, and provide concrete policy recommendations to enable a seamless EV transition for ACMs and especially the MSMEs. Thank you so much. Please feel free to grab a copy on your way out. May I request Priya and Aprajita now to present token of appreciation as a gesture of gratitude to our panelists. Before we move on to our final section, can we please have a picture of just the panelists together? and the moderator. I request the panelists to join us in the audience, except Mr. Arindam Lahiri, sir. We now move on to the final and very special part of today's program, the signing of two important MOUs. These partnerships symbolize the collaborative spirit that will drive India's EV transition forward. The first MOU is between the Automotive Skill Development Council and WRI India. This partnership will focus on assessing the impacts of EV transition on jobs, co-developing the skilling strategies for emerging roles, and designing targeted training programs with strong emphasis on women's participation and leadership. I request Mr. Arindam Lahiri, CEO of Automotive Skill Development Council, and Ms. Garima, Assistant Vice President. Thank you so much. Now we are delighted to mark the signing of MOU between Curism Tech, the driving force behind Formula Bharat, India's premier engineering design competition that has empowered countless students to innovate and push the boundaries of mobility solutions. May I request Ms. Crystal Furtado, CEO of Curism Tech, Ms. Renata D'Souza, CMO of Curism Tech, on behalf of Curism Tech, and Mr. Madhav Pai, CEO of WRI India, and Ms. Anu Ranganathan, Program Lead Electric Mobility. Congratulations once again to our partners, and thank you so much for joining us today. With this, we conclude our today's session, and our shared work continues to ensure India's EV transition is not just green and technological, but inclusive, future ready, and people centered. Thank you so much.